was constantly moving, puffing, gasping for breath.
These behaviors were beyond my control.
He stopped walking entirely. All he did was hop.
Despite her mounting anguish, Beth continues trying to communicate with Sammy. But nothing could have prepared her for the wrenching moment that finally brings everything to a head.
Sammy came downstairs. He wouldn't talk to me. He just handed me this note that I unfolded. And I was absolutely scared to death by what it said.
We look at the doctors for what they can't. If diagnosis is a mystery.
Over the last year, Beth Maloney has watched her son Sammy transform into someone she doesn't recognize. Despite medications and therapy for OCD and Tourette's, grotesque compulsions rule his life. And Beth isn't sure how much more she can take.
Sammy came downstairs. He wouldn't talk to me. He just handed me this note that I unfolded, and he had written the word help in all capital letters.
I didn't think anyone would be able to help me, but I wrote help anyway. It was the only thing I could do.
I called my mother. I was sobbing. I said, I'm going to have to find him a placement where he can live because I cannot help him. We hung up the phone. Within 2 minutes, the phone rang again. My mom said, you need to talk to this woman who works with me. I think she can help you. As a result of that conversation, I took Sammy to see Dr. Catherine Nicolaitis in New Jersey.
I saw Sammy in August of 2003. I got a complete history from Beth. His symptoms were at a crisis level.
Most significantly, Dr. Nicolaitis is intrigued by one clear fact of his case. Sammy hasn't responded to any of the medications he's been taking.
She tried to give him a physical exam, but he really wasn't able to tolerate much touching.
I had some thoughts in terms of a diagnosis. We needed to do some blood work.
They probably ran 10 different tests. I was scared to death. I believed in my heart that we were going to find the answer. The results of the blood work came back in 24 hours.
He was producing antibodies to a specific bacteria, Streptococcus. And once we had the elevated blood results, that confirmed for us the diagnosis of Pandas.
Pandas, or pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorder associated with strep, is a rare autoimmune disorder in which antibodies attack the brain. In a healthy child, when Streptococcus bacteria infect the body, the immune system produces antibodies that target and destroy the strep. But in children like Sammy, for some unknown reason, the antibodies brutally assault the brain, causing OCD and Tourette's-like symptoms.
We don't know why the antibodies do this. The antibodies think that it's attacking the strep, but it's actually attacking neurons in the brain, which are responsible for motor movement. The manifestations are tic-like manifestations and obsessive-compulsive symptoms.
Sammy never had a sore throat. Some people are asymptomatic for strep.
Amazingly, the irrational fears, the unnatural behaviors, and even the outlandish visions were all the direct result of one simple thing: strep antibodies wreaking havoc on his brain. And it's now clear why the medicine he was taking had no effect.
Serotonin reuptake inhibitors are used to treat obsessive-compulsive symptoms, not strep.
Any impact they might have had was counteracted by the strep antibodies that were continually bombarding his brain. In fact, if Sammy hadn't been diagnosed when he was, his bizarre behaviors would have continued to multiply and possibly caused irreversible damage.
There is a sentiment that if you do not interfere early enough, that there can be excessive damage to the brain.
The scariest thing is that I could have totally lost my son to something as simple as a strep infection.
The good news is that Pandas is treatable. While drugs target the underlying strep, therapy can help Sammy unlearn his compulsive behaviors.
We introduce a mood stabilizer as well as antibiotic therapy so that you are not only aiming your treatment at strep, but that you are also using traditional treatments that address obsessive-compulsive behavior or tics.
But unfortunately, Dr. Nicolaitis can't give Beth any guarantees about whether Sammy will ever be his old self again.
Sammy had the worst case of obsessive-compulsive symptoms I had ever seen. There's no way to predict whether he would be able to return to school.
I did not think I was going to get better. I thought I was going to have those behaviors for life.
Beth Maloney has just learned that her son Sammy has Pandas, an extremely rare disease that attacks the brain. For over a year, it's made his life a living nightmare, ruled by bizarre obsessions. Now, the 13-year-old is on antibiotics that should help rein in his strange behavior, but he may never fully recover.
I was worried about whether there might have been permanent brain damage. I wanted to finally have Sammy back.
The next several days are almost unbearable as Beth waits to see some sign of improvement.
I began to notice differences immediately.
When I first started to not do behaviors, it was kind of a wonderful feeling.
At the time, and as aggressively as we treated Sammy, we were able to halt this process so that there was not significant damage.
Gradually, over the winter, Sammy's behaviors disappear altogether, and eventually, he no longer needs treatment.
He spent the next 6 months making up all of the 6th and 7th grade curriculum so that he returned to 8th grade with his classmates right on time.
I don't really feel any sort of OCD or Tourette's type behaviors or compulsions anymore.
While Sammy is thrilled to be back to his old self, he must now face an undeniable truth. He will always be susceptible to the condition.
If he were to begin to experience behaviors, he would know these are his symptoms of a strep infection. He needs to go on antibiotics for a couple of weeks, in the same way that another person would go on for a sore throat.
Beth is grateful that Sammy survived the ordeal unscathed, and now she can't help but wonder why his psychologist and psychiatrist failed to recognize the seemingly obvious clues to her son's condition.
How could it never cross their mind that the root cause of his disorder could be an infection?
Pandas is controversial because Pandas has only been recognized in the last 20 years or so. I think there may be undiagnosed cases because traditionally we look for strep by a throat infection, not by a presentation of symptoms of OCD and tics.
Today, Sammy is 20 and living a full and completely normal life.